So here's the deal. I know I may not look it, but it wasn't so long ago that I was a student myself. I've watched these educational videos, and like you, I quickly grew tired of talking heads over PowerPoints or people standing in front of whiteboards. Now, I'll admit that I'm guilty of doing all that before, and I probably will again, but not in this series. Here, the goal is short, simple, and to the point. The liberal arts involve a lot of paper writing, and you don't have time to sort through hours of detailed analysis of different paper types. But what about 5 minutes? 5 minutes where I dish the dirt on how to write one kind of paper really well. Don't believe me? Then let's time it out. Probably the most common type of paper you are going to write in the humanities is a research essay. You can't just make things up here. You're going to have to do some digging for your answers, which means you need to know your question. Sometimes your professor gives you a specific question to answer. Other times they just give you a topic, or maybe you even have to come up with one on your own. Whatever the case, before you go to the library, online or otherwise, make sure you know what question your research needs to answer. But how do you do that? Where do you start, and how do you narrow down what's relevant? Well, first, it's important to distinguish between primary and secondary sources. Primary sources are original sources, the eyewitness accounts, those texts most immediately used by your discipline. That's scripture in biblical studies, novels, poems, or short stories in English, or a treatise in philosophy. What that means is that primary sources are often course dependent. A treatise in law can be a primary source, but in a course on biblical ethics, that same treatise might become a secondary source to analyze the law of Moses. The difference is in the emphasis. Primary sources are usually what's analyzed, but a secondary source provides that analysis. That's why most secondary sources are essays, journal articles, or other scholarly works. Secondary sources take a stance, provide a perspective, or present an argument about a topic, and this is where you're going to spend the majority of your time researching. Now keep in mind that not all secondary sources are created equal. Conversations and situations within academic disciplines are constantly changing, so when possible, try to stick with sources that are no more than 20 years old. And don't feel that you're limited to books either. Online journal articles are often more specific and detailed in their subject matter. Just make sure they're peer-reviewed. And if you're not sure whether a source is useful or not, skim it. Go over the table of contents, read the abstract, read those first few sentences of the first few paragraphs. That should give you a pretty good idea pretty quickly if a source is relevant to your topic. Now let's get one thing clear on the front end. A research paper is not merely a summary of your research. If all you do is describe what scholars have said but don't provide any critical analysis of those sources, it's not a research paper. A research paper requires analyzing, evaluating, and at times critiquing the sources you researched with the intent of offering your take on the issue. With that in mind, there are two kinds of research papers. The first is an analytical paper, and here your job is to, well, analyze something, usually a text or an idea. English papers love these. Analyze life on the river in the adventures of Huckleberry Finn, or consider what Shakespeare's Macbeth has to say about legitimate kingship. You'll notice that these questions aren't about persuasion, but depth. This means that analytical papers are about thoroughly investigating a perspective or aspect of your topic, and then incorporating your research to do so. Alternatively, you might be asked to write an argumentative paper. Now persuasion is the goal. It's time to stand for something, to present one idea, perspective, or opinion as stronger or more viable than others. Argumentative essays may answer questions like, was the First or Second World War more influential in shaping the 20th century? Is justification by faith really the central doctrine of Romans? What leadership quality is most lacking in emerging leaders? In these essays, you pick a side, and then your research backs up your case. See, that's the key. Whether argumentative or analytical, research papers use research to back up their claims. Using research gives your arguments credibility and shows that you have tapped into the larger academic conversations around these issues. It shows that you understand the counterarguments and can combat them. You set the direction of your paper, but then you use your research to guide your reader to your conclusion. That's called paper structuring. A research paper needs an introduction, body, and conclusion. Your introduction provides your reader with the key context or background information that they need to understand your paper topic. The body presents your research, and then your conclusion wraps everything up while suggesting implications for life or future research in this area. Now, how you piece together that paper's body is going to depend a lot on your topic. You can use a compare and contrast formula, look for cause and effect, list things chronologically, but whatever structure you choose, it should logically organize your research. Don't just ramble from topic to topic, but be intentional in guiding your reader from one idea to the next. And finally, every research paper needs a thesis statement, usually but not always towards the end of your introduction. This is the central unifying idea that affirms or defends your paper's big claim. It's the answer to your question, the thing you want your reader to be convinced of by the time they finish reading your paper. Papers live and die on the strength of that thesis statement, so make sure your paper has a good one. And that is everything you need to know about research papers in 5 minutes or less. Okay, I'll admit that that's a lot to cover in 5 minutes, and you may be left with some questions. How do I skim my research effectively? What specifically should go in an introduction, and what is even considered a good thesis statement? Thankfully, Writing and Tutoring Services is here to help. We have loads of tip sheets and online seminars that go into these topics in much greater detail. If that's not your style, you can make an appointment with one of our writing consultants. Our team would be happy to discuss any aspect of research papers with you one-on-one, or you can email us with questions at writing@tyndale.ca. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got to go and make sure that this thing is actually 5 minutes in editing. Gotta be a man of my word after all. All the best!